And my son followed suit and joined the agency 13, 13 years ago. And I saw it taking a toll on him. I mean, even in what we were doing in this period of recognizing the impact this job has, I could it I could see it.
How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, we have a very important topic coming your way. We're going to talk about, are we doing enough to protect the mental well-being of our correctional staff? It's a very important topic. We're going to have Brian Dawe in from One Voice, a very big advocate for those in the corrections profession. And I say corrections profession because even though he was an officer, he speaks the needs of all people that work in corrections. I love having him on. There's a lot we can learn, but the big thing here is about unity. And we also have, I hope I say it right, Stephen Walker. Stephen Walker is going to share a it's going to be a hard story to hear, but it's a story that he shares because he knows that this story somehow is going to have value for someone else who may be going through something. And it's basically going to be a story that, guys, this is pretty much why we have to have a show like this today. The story that he's going to share, I'm not going to give too much, but the story that he's going to share is going to be the outcome of what happens when agencies fail. Maybe when we fail each other, you know? So hearing a story like this is just going to be a way to bring us into reality and hopefully motivate us to do more. I mean, that's the key. And on all levels, not just the agency level, but also us. If there's a concern with us, we also have to recognize it and then be willing to take help. So we're going to have a very powerful show today. Hopefully, you guys stay and listen to the whole thing, because what we're going to do first is we're going to talk about mental health in the profession at first. And then after that context is provided, we're going to hear the story from Stefan Walker. Now, guys, I just want to give you my sponsors real quick. We have American Military University. If you guys haven't yet, please check out American Military University. It's a great school if you're looking to seek higher education. You know, it's a great school, very supportive of us in the profession, supportive of the channel Tier Talk. We also have Guardian RFID, from inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence. Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit guardianrfid.com for more information. I also have a new sponsor coming our way shortly. We'll know more in March. It's a big sponsor. I'm proud to have them. They're going to be very supportive of what we do on the channel, but also very supportive of the profession, because they're going to take care of me so I can do things for the profession. That's the key. And I do have a book on the market called Inmate Manipulation Decoded. It's available on Amazon. Before we go into the show, I want to read something. I have a daily reader coming out. It should be coming out next year. It's got like a quote for each day. And then what I'm also going to do on the bottom is quote different people from the profession. So I'm going to try to get 365 something quotes. But I want to read something from the Daily Reader that's going to apply to today's show. It's going to be on January 5th of my Daily Reader. So again, guys, I got to do a quote for each day of the year. But it's called Take Time. The title of this is Take Time to Process Your Thoughts. Assault, suicide, rapes, murder, working in corrections staff will see it all. They will see things behind the wall that can never be unseen. They will also respond to situations that will scar them for life. Staff need to be mindful of their mental health as they travel from moment to moment. They need to find time outside of the emergent situation to mentally process what has just happened. They need to look inwards and ask themselves the right questions to ensure their mental well-being is intact. Remember, in the end, we are human, and the things we will see and respond to will find its way into our heads. Be mindful of how you feel and make sure you process your thoughts with an honest look at yourself when not in uniform. That's my quote. And then the quote from my other professional for this one is going to be William Young, author, influencer, has a YouTube channel himself called Just Corrections. And he says staff must be mindful and intentional when it comes to caring for their mental health, as the correctional environment has the ability to emotionally erode those exposed to its elements for a prolonged period of time. Very powerful. All right, guys, got all the formalities out. Let's bring on Brian Dawe. Brian Dawe, if you mind introducing yourself to our audience, please.
Hey, everybody, and thanks, Tony. Good to be here again. My name is Brian Dawe. I'm the National Director for One Voice United, and I will end my 40th year in corrections on May 31st and begin my 41st year on June 1st. So I've been around a little while. Good to be here on a very
well, Brian, I just got to say something before we bring on. I'm going to call him Mr. Walker. I don't want to throw. I know it's Stefan, but I don't know why I see O's that are in that name, and I know they're not there. So before we bring on Mr. Walker, over 40 years, retired, still actively involved. There is no greater love and sacrifice than what you're doing right now for this profession. So let me thank you for everything you're doing. I know you are connected to this and passionate. And I just think it's always an honor to have you on the show because there's so much we can learn. More importantly, for me to learn from you, but I like to hope that we can learn from each other. So I just honored to have you, Bri. And I love what you do, the One Voice Initiative, Andy Potter, the whole crew. Guys, they have a great video up right now that is a One Voice Initiative video. That's actually where I got where I talked to Brian. I said, Brian, I got to have Mr. Walker on the show. After I saw this video, I got to have him on the show. So if you guys get a chance, what's the YouTube channel is it on? Is it the One Voice Initiative?
You can go right to onevoice.org, and you can either go to the Facebook page or you can go right to the website, and the video is right there. You can view it right from those spots. And you can also download our white paper, which deals directly with this issue, called I Am Not Okay. It's about a 60-page compilation of studies, research, statistics, all outlining what's going on inside corrections right now, with a lot of quotes from officers from around the country, other problems that they've had in dealing with our profession and the mental ravages and toll that it can take on us and our families. And that's a really part of the untold story as well.
And guys, by the way, if you really care, this goes beyond talking. This is an investment of time that these gentlemen have committed to. So we could talk the talk all day, but Brian and Mr. Walker, they work. They got the results to prove that they are passionate about this topic, and we want to save lives. That's the key. Mr. Walker, first off, the honor is mine. Thank you for taking time. I know you're a busy gentleman, so thank you for sharing your story, you will be sharing your story with the audience. So thank you for coming on and be willing to do that. But Mr. Walker, do you mind introducing yourself to our audience, give them a background and?
And it's Stephan, man, and
Stephan.
If it makes it easier for you, my friends call me Steph.
I'll call you Steph.
Steph Curry, man. He's done more for my name in his short career.
All right, so let me be fair. So Steph, do you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Absolutely. My name is Stephan Walker. I am a retired youth correctional officer. I've been with the agency for 37 years when I retired. But I also have had the distinct pleasure of representing the men and women in California corrections, serving as their director of governmental affairs for the better part of a decade. And I now operate loosely as the director of correctional health, which is an initiative we began working on about probably about 10 years ago. The reality of what was happening in not just our agency, but across corrections as a whole, just kind of hit home with a few suicides that we just didn't see coming and didn't understand what was happening. So I've been working on this tooth and nail inside the agency, outside the agency, with nonprofits, with academia, with anybody that will friggin' listen to us, man. That there's something about our occupation, something about the environment that we work in that has a negative effect, especially if you're not aware and not working to mitigate against it. So I know that's a long way around, brother, but it's that big of a topic.
Yeah, but conversations like this, there's no short version.
You're right.
We can't risk missing out on anything. So And also, by the way, shout out to anybody that work in juvenile facilities. And that's a whole nother level of issues. So again, shout out for your time served there. I mean, juvenile facilities are no joke. I mean, there's just a lot of pressure there, and I know a lot of people may feel that they don't get their rights, like their right deserved, like the officers that work there. Guys, my props go to anybody that work in juvenile corrections. It's just an extremely hard job, and if I may, from behalf of Tier Talk, I'm sure the people here thank you for what you do. Um, Definitely underappreciated. Hey, so Brian, let's do this first, Brian, before we get into Steph's story. Let's talk about, you know, what the profession right now. I mean, do we have concerns in our profession or issues that must be addressed? Because right now we do have staff that we do believe have mental health concerns. And at this point, we need to start holding people accountable so we can actually create true good change.
Well, it really stems from, I think, a need for training and better understanding of what's going on. First, let's take a look at what the problem is. You know, the general population has a PTSD rate of 3.5%. Now, the men and women who work frontline corrections, and you got to understand, first of all, that overwhelming amount of these people are pre-screened for psychological disorders before they ever given the job. Now, we're one of the few occupations that are authorized to use deadly force if we have to. And so it's important that we're personally screened psychologically before we take this job, before we're given the job. So we're looking at a population that already is probably not predisposed to PTSD because we've been checked. Yet, when you compare our PTSD to general population, ours is 34.1% compared to 3.5% for the general population. And when you look at police officers around the country, God love them, they do a tremendous job, but their PTSD rate is 15%. Less than half of ours. Their suicide rates are less than half of ours. God love them, that's great, but our suicide rates are through the roof. There isn't anybody that touches our suicide rates. We have 156 officers taking their lives every single year that we know of. And that doesn't count any of the officers, the retirees. There's not a state in the country that we know of that tracks our retirees. There also isn't a state in the country that we know of that prepares officers for retirement, absent just talking about their deferred comp or what they're going to get for pensions. There's no one that prepares them psychologically from going from a world where you are totally in control, when you're the authoritarian figure, when people have to move, when you tell them to move, to going out into a world of total shock when none of that pertains to anything you do anymore. We don't do enough for them. We don't do enough for our new cadets coming in the door. We don't train them properly. We don't give them mentors right away. We're not doing enough for our families and teaching them how to see the telltale signs when a loved one who works in corrections is having problems. And I greatly appreciate you pointing out the fact that it's not just correctional officers. It's also FTEs, all full-time staff, correctional staff, non-custody, having 27% PTSD rate just from watching what happens where they work. Not even being involved in the day-to-day, hand-to-hand as we are, and they have a PTSD rate of 27%. One on top of the other, on top of the other, on top of the other. And then we have the biggest problem of all, the catch-22. You cannot tell anybody you have a problem, because if you have a psych problem in corrections, they're going to take your right to carry a firearm. They're going to have a liability issue in case there's any problems with the inmates. So you basically are cut off. If you look for help, you could lose your job. If you don't look for help, you could lose your life. They're put in an impossible situation, and we have to change that. It has to be a cultural change. There has to be an acceptance and a realization of what's happening to the men and women that do this job over any period of time. There has to be constant reinforcement. There has to be training to deal with the emotional stress we have. We don't do any real training in emotional intelligence, in teaching officers how to deal with extremely stressful situations and how to get out of there alive and get everybody else out of those situations alive too. And we just don't do enough of that stuff. We'll spend all kinds of time on physical self-defense. And we know we need that. I mean, the job can be a dangerous job. There's no question about that. We lose 11 officers every year, line of duty deaths, either to acts of violence from inmates or responding to acts of violence. 11 a year. Lose 156 to suicide. But we spend almost no time in our training academies on mental health awareness and training. We've got to change these things, Tony. And it has to start with all of us, with the administration, with the public, with the inmate advocates, because, the inmate advocates are all behind this as well. They want us to have better training, because what does that mean for them? We're the 911 for their loved ones. When it goes south in a prison, when the gangbanger wants to beat up the other gangbanger, who's the one who puts their lives on the line between that? Who's saving these folks inside those walls? That's us. So those people want us to have better training as well and better de-escalation skills, because the better trained we are in that, the less tension inside the prison, the less violence for everybody. So it behooves all of us to take a really good look at the damages that's being caused, how we mitigate them, and how we stop them in the very beginning.
Yeah, I'm spot on. And Steph, Brian touched on culture. Now, for me, I like to think that management sets the culture. So management definitely has a big part in um, kind of motivating people to, let's do the right thing. Let's make sure that staff know it's okay to admit they're vulnerable, and let's have an environment that promotes trust. Because obviously, if there's no trust in management, no matter what solution we come up with, it's not going to be trusted enough for people to follow through on. But with that said, management does set the culture. I get it. But I feel like there's a lot of different subcultures as well. I'm sure there's a culture amongst their peers that could also be a concern, because even if management allowed the officers to express the vulnerability, I think the people that are most immediate to those officers could also have a negative or positive effect, depending. But can you talk about the culture a little bit and what we could do to motivate a culture that allows the people to express vulnerabilities?
Yeah, look, I think one of the first things that we have to acknowledge is that prisons were designed for punishment. So they're inherently steeped in pain, fear, and hurt. Now, unfortunately, the I think the unintended consequence that has developed throughout the years is that no one recognizes that that's something that's vicariously absorbed by the correctional officers, the vicarious trauma of all of that. And so they never, in bargaining, in training until here recently, and I would say it's a relatively new phenomena within the agency as far as training goes, about the mental and physiological impacts this job has. So we're still steeped in this culture of just, manning up and powering through it and sucking it up. So we don't talk about what we feel, what we experience, the things that we see. Um, but that's got to change, because the reality is no human being can be exposed to this for. I think we're beginning to see, officers with 3, 4, 5 years in the agencies either leaving, developing this dis-ease, and unfortunately they're taking their own lives. So we've got to start this earlier, as Brian touched on. The whole psychological screening is I don't believe that it's sufficient to recognize some of the underlying triggers, such as ACEs, that a person walks into that environment and there's nothing but fingers looking for triggers. Um, and the officers, we get paid to observe people. That's our job, is to watch people. But what they haven't done historically is teach us to recognize when there's something amiss with our fellow coworker, with the person standing on the line next to us, and then reaching out and saying, "Hey, man, are you okay? Hey, brother. Hey, sister. Are you all right?" And admit that, I have some of those same feelings. I've had some of those same concerns, and this is what I did to get through it. That whole mentorship, that whole field training officer kind of component, the peer support, that stuff has to be augmented to recognize the humanity of individuals, and that vulnerability that is unfortunately these occupations seize upon. And it just has this this negative, malicious, malignant development that just festers within us when we don't talk about it. So we have to get to a point where we can recognize that we're not in this alone. That the things that we're feeling, there's our brothers and sisters have gone through this as well, and we can get through it together. Can't hear you, Tony.
I thank you. I hate that part. That's the one part I hate. I saw it happening, but you beat me to the punch. What you said is so spot on, because I like how you're saying we're in it together, and I don't think that just means frontline being in it together alone. I think it means that the whole agency, the whole facility, whatever it is, every department, we're in the same world. We're exposed to the same concerns, the same issues. So therefore, we can literally walk around next to each other and be a reminder that we're not alone. I mean, for people that think you're alone, look to the left and right of you, because people that, the same things that you're dealing with, so are they. And I think that we could be a great resource for each other. But there's something else that you touched on too, which matters, is that are we training staff enough to recognize the concern so we could be more preventive? Because it may not be something that happens in a moment. It could be something that happens through time, and maybe there's certain signs that we could catch before it gets to that point where we can no longer recognize the cause. I mean, I think the biggest concern that we have right now is the fact that because we don't want to be vulnerable, we keep on pushing things down, down, and down until eventually we explode. But when we explode, we can't go back and identify what caused it, because it's probably not the incident we just had. It's
Yeah,
probably something that we didn't properly deal with months prior.
yeah,
So
It's
having said
cumulative.
that, I think it's great to have the people that are next to you to kind of recognize the first time you push something down. And sometimes, guys, and maybe Brian will agree with this, is I think it's actually good. I know in the moment when we're in corrections, we respond to a code, like I mentioned in the thing I wrote. In the moment, you may not have time to process it. I get it, because we have to kind of be focused and settle in this concern. But I'm going to tell you something. The moment the concern is over, don't think you don't still feel it. You may not think about it, but something's still there. And I think it would be great if afterwards we sat and debriefed, and
Yeah.
instead of really discussing, because the reports are written now, instead of really discussing the specifics of what happened, maybe we could finally ask, hey, how do you feel about what happened? What's your thoughts on that, Brian? I'll go with you first.
No, I think that's a critical component. Debriefing from incidents. One of the biggest mistakes I've seen happen in corrections is when they got rid of roll call in majority of facilities across the country. They got rid of pre-shift briefing. We used to be able to come in there and you'd find out what was going on inside the facility. That was important. But what was more important was the developing of the camaraderie among the officers there, knowing each other, and that feeling of oneness, that feeling of togetherness when you're going into those situations. They removed that for a dollar bill, Tony. And that's one of the biggest problems we have. And it's the same situation with debriefing. Oh, yeah, we want to debrief, but we're going to debrief it on your time. We ain't going to spend 15 minutes to pay overtime to get you to do it. Because in our line of work, it's not like the police where they can pull you off the line. They can't pull us off the line. We don't have the staff. We don't even get to write our reports until the day is over, for the most part, because we're so understaffed. So it's a host of problems. But what you're saying is you're exactly right. Yeah, that's right on the money. And that's one of the things we have to look at. We need debriefing teams that come in, and they have to be peer oriented so that the guys and gals can talk to them and not feel like they're under the gun, that this is going to be written down on some report someplace. And we have to talk to our men and women before they go behind those walls, update them on what's going on, what's the gang activity. Some of the things they've done just amazes me. And I'll be very brief with the story. When I started, and this is 82, when I walked in through the prison for the first time, they pointed to the towers and they told me, son, if it goes off, get to those towers. If it goes off in the yard, get to the bottom of those towers, because there's firearms up there and they'll save your life. And we'll come in and we'll get you out of there. 3 years in, I come walking into the building and they're calling out the officers for roll call and where the assignments are, and they don't call anybody out for the towers. Well, what's going on with the towers? Well, there was too much money. They decided to unman them. So what do you think the thought process was for this young officer and all the other officers that were with me? How much value did my life then have? Where does the cynicism that I have had most of my life for administration come from? Right? It's those types of decisions that make the officers go, we can't believe a word you're going to say about our health and welfare. We just do not believe you, because the actions you take belie those what we consider to be lies. You can't tell us you care a lot about us and then run us 16, 4 or 5 mandatories every week. You can't do that stuff, because then we don't believe you. And that starts a real big problem, because now we're not going to believe a thing you tell us, and we're certainly not going to open up about our mental health. So it's a whole host of things that we have to start from the very beginning of showing that we care for these officers, not only at their training academy, but with roll call, with debriefing, things that really show them that their mental health matters. But it comes down to money, Tony. And you know as well as I do, you're in a managerial position now, right? What are you judged on? Don't have too much overtime, my friend. Make sure you come in on your budget, right? They don't want to hear about the officers with PTSD or PTSI. They want to make sure you come in on your budget. And we know that, and that's not your fault. That's the system's fault. That's one of the biggest problems we have. We've got to change a whole bunch of stuff in this system. And Stefan pointed out perfectly. This is a system built on punishment. And as long as it's built on punishment, we're not going to get anything changed.
Yeah, I'll tell you something. I mean, there's so many points you hit on, because we do have systematic concerns. We would call them upstream concerns that we kind of deal with downstream measures. So basically, systematic concerns that we try to resolve in reactionary measures. But you created a great foundation for something I love Steph to explore real quick, is that one of the things that you mentioned, Brian, that you really hit on to me was, we could talk about providing all these initiatives for staff to kind of go to, but if there is no trust, they're not going to go. Right. So with all the concerns we have right now, and where we're at with what could be seen as a divide, because I do believe there's a lot of generalized animosity out in corrections. If Gangi's a shitty admin, it's not just Gangi, it's admin. If Steph's an officer that I just can't get along with, it's not just Steph, it's the whole front line or all the officers, or, man, that teacher got me upset, damn civilians. We have a way of generalizing things that builds separation. And the problem is, it also takes away from personal accountability. So, but generalizing seems to be easier. Are we at a point right now, Steph, in your opinion, that can we, before we even start this initiative, can we build trust, and how would we do that?
Wow, man.
I got you on that one.
Yeah, just throw me the slow, high, fast one, huh?
I'm sure you got it, because I watched your video. I know you're a hell of a speaker, man.
Brother, look, I think it's something Brian touched on, and we have been talking about for decades, is value. Where do you place value? And sadly, it hasn't been demonstrated that it's on us as individuals. The very thing Brian talked about, I mean, it popped in my head instantly. Look, my initial engagement with the union was that I wrote 179 grievances on staffing violations because they were undermanning us. And it's like, they don't give, Tony, I don't want, they don't give a crap about us, brother. All they care about is that 24-hour period. Nobody leaves, nobody dies, and everybody's where they're supposed to be. Other than that, they don't care how we get it done, which is sad, because they'll run a short shift, and it doesn't matter whether it compromises our safety, which ultimately impacts our mental well-being and also has an impact on our self-worth. And that's why some of that dissidence develops, and that animosity you talked about other people and other entities. Man, it's tough. Trust it's got to be a two-way street. You can't tell me that you value me and then you do something that demonstrates that you don't, and then expect me to trust that in the future, when you talk about wellness, that you honestly have my best interest at heart. No, 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 no. This is, look, you, number one, you created this environment as the agency. You hired me to do a job. I took the job it's a mutual contract in that we're agreeing to a set of um, exchanges. I'm going to give you a service. You're going to ensure that the work environment you put me in to do that service is safe. When it's not, somebody broke the contract here. And if you look historically, you look at the number of suicides, the number of fights that we've had to have just over protective equipment.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that for a second. You put us in literally the most turbulent environment of human behavior, where literally storms are raging every moment of the day. And we have to fight you for a vest. We have to fight you for safety equipment that will help maintain this amount of control.
For PPEs.
So, and I know I'm rambling, Tony. I'm sorry. Brian's used to this by now, man. Actually, I learned this from him. Some of it. But trust is a difficult. It's a difficult thing to establish, and when you violate it, it's even more difficult to reestablish. You have to do something extraordinary for that.
And I know I have a thought, but I know Brian actually had a thought on that too. Brian, what was that thought that you had? Because I know you were coming through before Stephen had a chance to finish, or Steph.
On what point?
When he started talking about reestablishing the trust.
Oh, it has to begin at the very beginning at the academy. Unfortunately, and this is reality, guys. You guys have both been in the business a long time like I have. This is reality. There's a whole group of guys that we're never going to impact anymore. We don't have the chance. It's too far gone. They've got too many years in. They've seen too many things go south. They've seen too many lies. They've heard too many tales. You're not going to change it. We have to look at this as a long-term transformation. I'll never see the end of it. My grandchildren may see the transition from a punitive to a more correctional environment. I can only hope that's the case, because that's when we will start to make some change. But it has to come now from the very beginning parts. It has to come from the academy. It has to come from a new set of training dynamics that really emphasize the need for mental health and mental awareness. It's going to help everybody behind those walls. And that's where it has to start. It has to start at the very beginning. And there has to be true, honest commitment to it by involving our family members, by putting the money into mentorships, by putting in the money into third-party confidentiality parties that can handle conversations with officers before they start to regain the trust with the agency. You know, those types of things cost money. And when the agency says, oh, yeah, we want to help you, but then they won't spend the money to do it. Oh, yeah, we'll do it, but we're going to set up an internal EAP. Well, we don't trust you. Right. So what good is an internal EAP going to do? We ain't going. And then what happens is we don't go, and so they say, well, we don't have a problem. No one's using it. And
or they discipline
it.
Or they use the disciplinary system as the solution to that what they classify as deviant behavior. And that's a part of the problem. Is they've watched you deteriorate, but instead of intervening, they stand back and they default to discipline.
And when you blow up, it's on you.
Exactly. It's some personal defect. But you ran me through a psych screening in order to get the job. So I was okay when I took it. So what's the factor that caused this?
Right. And you know what I want to add here, because me and Brian touched on this before. I read a great article a while ago by Katerina Spinaris. And I think it was an article that was great when it came to people that did not want to take accountability or were resistant to, it's not me, this is BS. So the way she kind of alleviated that defense was, it doesn't matter what you think, it matters the perspective of what they believe.
Yes.
So regardless of if you don't want to believe it or not, if you don't want to believe that you are a part of that, if they feel that, then you have to kind of try your best to understand that perspective. And then if you are going to make any effort to move forward from that perspective, not your own.
Right.
Because you're not going to be able to move it forward from a mind where you don't understand where that perspective is coming from. And I think that's key. The key is, for me, when it comes to the trust, is can we understand where the perspective is from both sides of the divide? That's where you have to become courageous. That means I can't stay on my side anymore. I have to be willing to cross over to what some people may think enemy territory, but it's not. Once you cross over, you realize it's not, but you're not going to realize that from a distance. You cross over, you see what people have, and eventually we start bringing people to the middle. But the courage part comes from, and this is where I feel it lacks, is who's going to start moving forward? You know, is Frontline going to start, or are we going to start? I put it on management. It should be on them, but I would like to hope that they're received. But go ahead, Steph, you have a thought? I'm sorry.
Yeah, look, literally, we're in the middle of a minefield. And at this point, nobody knows who laid these mines. Let's just be real. The reality is we're all standing in the middle of it. And we got to quit pointing fingers and blaming each other and recognize that the only way we're going to get out of this is by working together to get out of it.
You know, you're so. Can I tell you something? So when me and Brian had this dialogue, we're both passionate individuals, right? So, you know, when people tend to, let's say, blame admin, I'm going to take it personal because I am admin, you know, and I identify with that position. You know, and of course, Brian, loving his roots, you know, that frontline perspective, he's going to be very passionate about them because he's connected to those heroes. He's identified as the heroes. And Brian caught me in check because I stood on my pedestal and I spoke. And then I went to cut off Brian for 1 second. And Brian goes, I listened to you for 30 minutes. It's my turn. Now, mind you, it wasn't 30 minutes. But having said that, I shut up because he's right. He's 100% correct. He gave me a chance to speak. Let me shut up now and let me hear his perspective. And right then and there, we weren't that far apart from each other. We were actually pretty damn close to what it was, but we allowed our positions to get in the way. You know, if I'm a supervisor, shut up sometimes and listen. And if you're front line, hey, admin's not always the bad guy. Let's hear what they got to say. But to be honest, is sometimes we play the position to a point where we're not willing to listen to each other because at the end, that's just admin. At the end, that's just an officer. No, it's Gangi. No, it's Brian. No, it's Steph. We're not talking to you based on just the position. We're human lives here. If you see it as the position first, we've already failed.
Right.
That's right.
We've already failed. So I think the effort comes here is that if we're going to address this issue, if we want to build trust, besides building understanding with each other, don't see the position. Just see us.
Yeah.
We're asking for help. My family trusts us to try to do the right thing. How do we come together just to make it better for humans to work in this profession?
There it is.
What's your thoughts on shutting me up, Brian?
That was an interesting comment. We always have good conversations.
Yeah.
And anyway, that's one of the great things about able to converse with you. You come up from the ranks, but you'll listen. You're willing to listen. I'm a little more hard-headed sometimes. But I do want to say this. You'll be at our convention in Washington, D.C. We're going to have a lot of administrators in our convention in Washington, D.C. You mentioned Bill Young earlier in your conversations. Bill is one of our panelists in Washington, D.C. Steph is one of our panelists in Washington, D.C. You mentioned Katerina Spinaris. She's one of our panelists in Washington, D.C. And we also have Brianna Mellon. Now, Brianna Mellon is a very special young lady that I met in Massachusetts years ago. She started an organization called On Guard to raise awareness of officer suicide when her father, who was only 42 years old, but had retired from corrections as a captain, took his own life. And that was 10 years ago. And the trickle-down effect, like when you crack a piece of glass and all those ripples go up, well, it's amazing the trickle-down effect that the loss of this man's life has had over 10 years to all of those family and friends. And to hear her tell her story That's pretty powerful stuff as well. And so this is open to all correctional officers and all administrators. We don't charge any fee to attend this conference. It's in line with our Medal of Honor as well. And it's also taking place at the exact same time of Law Enforcement Officers Week and the Candlelight Vigil. So if you're going to be in Washington, D.C., or if you care about this issue, contact us. Contact Tony. He's going to be there. Contact myself. Contact Steph. Take a look at One Voice United on our website and get there. This is an incredibly, there is no more important dialogue right now going on in corrections than the mental health of the men and women who work there and live there, because they're under our care and custody. And that's our responsibility just as well. So I hope you can get there. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to plug that a little bit. I wanted to throw that in there. You're going to be there as well. And we're going to try and get Tony to live stream it, and we'll see if we can get him to do that.
Yeah, what I would like to do after that, I'll talk to one of my sponsors. I'm sure they'll be 100% a part of this, so they can make.
Oh, by the way, Guardian, our buddy at Guardian, he's one of the panelists. He's going to be one of the expert professionals out of there as well.
Oh, there we go. Maybe, if I wasn't streaming, I would like to be on the panel. But I would like to do maybe the interviews afterwards.
Yes, absolutely.
Keep it going. But I'm going to talk to one of my other sponsors too as well, because I think that they could also maybe set up the equipment and then maybe make it a little bit more professional so we can have a few cameras set up. Let me reach out to them and see what I can do.
Yeah, tell them we'll take donations too.
Yeah.
So we're a nonprofit. We have no members.
I know. Trust me. Listen, I went to one of the reward ceremonies. It's amazing what you guys do for everybody. So it's definitely, if you guys are looking to invest in something to recognize our heroes, the National Medal of Honor Society, I loved it when I was there when we did it in Oklahoma. It was a beautiful event.
Huge event.
What was cool about that event, before we go into Steph's story, is I saw administration there, hear me out, backing the heroes. They're the ones that sponsored them to go there for some of them. Mm-hmm. Giving them time. So I thought that was pretty cool to see that there together. So can I tell you something? Before we go to Steph's story, we kind of talked about trust and working together. That's a great way to do it. Partnership between recognizing the heroes, and then when the hero looks back, who's sitting with their family? The administrator.
I just had a long talk with top administrators in New Hampshire Department of Corrections yesterday. I was on a podcast with them. They're definitely sending people. I've talked to several different departments of corrections. This is a very important conference.
Yeah, well, I'm going to show up there. I'm going to see if I can bring the family there as well. It's about it's in Washington, about 4 hours, not that bad. Easy drive. Now, guys, this is the part I'm going to kind of forward the show over. I'm going to let him take control of the show because it's his story. It's not meant to ask questions in the middle. This story is meant for us to hear it in its entirety. When I heard it for the first time, it was moving, because this is going to be the end result if we fail at everything we just discussed right now. I want people to realize that. And for someone like Steph to come in and share the story, the value behind this all is to let you know that we could do something about it now. So let's not make this death happen in vain. So again, Steph, first off, thank you for sharing this. You're going to be sharing a story, so thank you for this. And I'm going to go ahead and forward Tear Talk over to you. And again, it's a needed story, guys. So please, full attention.
Look, in short, we were a 3-generation family of corrections. My dad, myself, and my son. And we didn't talk about the job. Like I'm sure most of you don't. At home, you don't share the things that you experience, the things that you see, because you believe you're protecting your family. And Tony, I don't know if you're going to show the video or if you just want me to talk through this, because I can do it either way.
I want you to do what's best for you. This is your story. I'm not here to tell you how to tell it. All I know is there's tremendous value in the story. If you're willing to share it, I would love to hear it. If you can't, I understand. I would just love to hear it, but if you can't, I understand.
Yeah, it's look, the the short of it is I lost my father and my son. Um, my father had been in the agency for 20 some odd years, and he had all of these issues that the doctors just didn't seem to be able to rectify. And look, some of it is from Agent Orange, Vietnam. That was true, but the other part was that the things that he saw in his times in the department, he internalized. He didn't come home and talk about it. As a matter of fact, when I finally came back from the Marine Corps and asked him, because I was working multiple jobs, and I saw his paycheck, and I was just like, "Hey, man, I didn't know what he did because he didn't talk about it." I asked him, "Are they hiring?" And in hindsight now, I realized why there was this pause. And he ultimately said yes, and he brought me an application. I applied. Um, I went through the process, got hired, and didn't didn't talk about it. Didn't talk about why my fuse was shorter. Why I saw evil in the world. And maybe I was naive, which I don't believe. Look, I saw some stuff. Um, but I just began to see evil more prevalently than I had before I started working in the agency. And I believed in that I was protecting my family by not talking about what I saw. Even some of the drastic steps I took of overprotecting my son and my daughter. Um, and they just got so acclimated to that's just dad that nobody checked me. Um, to the point that but it was a job. It paid very well. I put my son through private school. I put my daughter through private school. Um, and I sheltered them from what I did, from what I saw. And my son followed suit and joined the agency 13, 13 years ago. And I saw it taking a toll on him. I mean, even in what we were doing in this period of recognizing the impact this job has, I could it I could see it, but I thought this is a strong young man. He's resilient, and we talk about some of the initiatives that we're pursuing and that we're working on, and I'm thinking that vicariously this stuff he's picking it up and he's caring for himself, but that's not enough. June 24th, my son took his life. He was a parole agent. He had been a correctional officer, been a correctional counselor, and he'd done everything that that the agency expects you to do. He manned up, he took shifts, he traveled 2 hours one way to work. He sacrificed time with his children.
Thank you, Stefan. That's thank you.
Look, man, we got to be more aggressive about this. We got to be more bold about it. Tony, you said it. We got to have the strength to stand up. And I mean, fight as vigilantly as if we're on the yard, back to back. We have to fight as vigilantly about our mental and physical and psychological well-being as well. We have, because if
We have
if
to do
we're
more.
not that aggressive about it, we're not going to survive. Somebody else is going to die.
You know, the first off, let me thank you for this, because having said that, um, the emotions, the vulnerability adds to the power of the story, which means that people that are listening to this, the ones that need to hear it will relate to it. But there's also people that don't know they need to hear it, and they're hearing it now. They're hearing not just the fact that a life was lost, but also how a life was affected by the loss. A father lost his son. So for people that are thinking about doing that, they also have to think about the fact that when you take a life, or even if it's your own, the impact it has on the people that are always going to wonder if they could have done more. And for me, Steph, this is why you're so committed to doing what you're doing right now, because you're doing more. This is your way of having closure. This is your way of letting your son know you will not die in vain, because at the end of the day, I will not let this profession get to anybody else. And to me, in my eyes, I'm sure in Brian's eyes, you're a hero. You're a hero because most people would find a reason to run away, but you found a reason to stay and keep fighting. And this has to happen. This has to happen. And again, I can't thank you enough for sharing this story, because I don't think I've ever had anything as powerful as this shared on my channel. And for people that stay and listen to the whole show, this was this had to happen. You had to hear this story, because in the end, if it's not you, it could be someone next to you. So having said that, having someone reach out, be vulnerable, share this story, hopefully gives us the insight to say, you know what? Let me be more mindful of my brothers and sisters, because I am their keeper. And this isn't just the physical, this is the mental. And the funny thing about this is that when you're your brother or sister's keeper for the mental, that takes more time. That's an investment.
Yeah,
That's not
Tony,
just, oh, go ahead.
you're absolutely right. Because you and don't discount those little things that you see. Because I beat myself up because there were little things that day that I did. Look, we watch people for a living. We understand human psychology at its base level. Don't don't let it just float off into the grab it, man. Grab it. Recognize, and even if you're fucking wrong, it will be better to be wrong.
Hey, Steve, you're 100% spot on. You're 100% spot on, because let me tell you something, Steve. First off, I'd rather be wrong and you hate me for it, because in the end, I could hate myself for being right. So you're 100% straight up correct. And I'm telling you something right now. If people don't feel this, if they don't see where you're coming from, because this isn't Officer Walker talking, this is a father who lost his son. And who doesn't want to relate to that? Regardless of how you may see the profession, how do we see a father who loses his son? How do we view that? And if we know there's something that could have been done about it, how do we not put our efforts to see if we could do what we can so it doesn't happen to somebody else?
How many
Even if that
times?
means, Steph, what you're doing right now, pouring out your soul so someone, just one person can listen. All you need is one person to listen. You know, again, hey Brian, you have any thoughts
I
here?
just
'Cause,
wanted to say that, first of all, Stefan, thank you as always. It's an amazing thing to see a man that I've known so long and so well, and who is a hero in my eyes, to come forward as you have, to be able to put yourself forward like this so others can learn from you and hopefully avoid this tragedy. To see you do that is just an amazing feat. And how many times have we heard after somebody has taken their lives, you never would have known. I never would have known. You never would have guessed. It's because we weren't looking. We got to look harder. We got to look deeper. And sometimes you can never avoid it. You just never, ever know. There's nothing you could do no matter what. There's nothing you can do. But we got to do everything we can. When we do see something, say something.
That's right.
Even if it's nothing more than, hey, man, you all right? You know, something bugging you today? You okay? Something set you off? Something wrong at home? You want to shoot the bull? Anything. Just let somebody else know that someone else is thinking about them. Sometimes that may be all it takes.
guys, if you get the message here, what Brian's saying, what Steph's saying, I think the key word out of all this I'm getting is effort. I mean, to me, it's effort. Everything that we're saying requires effort on so many different levels for so many different reasons. And this goes beyond talk. You know, I think we said before about intent versus behavior. You know, I mean, you could have the intent, but your behavior, it doesn't sync. So therefore, I don't believe you. Your word has no value if your behaviors, they don't connect with the intent. So having said that, guys, this is effort. This is ongoing. This is something that is long term. And this is something like, I think Brian said it best. He's not going to outlive this.
No.
That means it's a life commitment. Just by what Brian said. Brian today made it a life commitment. But in my mind, a life commitment means something that you love. Because to me, that's the only thing I commit my life to. My kids, my wife, my family. So what are we saying right now? That we're committing our lives to this profession. But more importantly, to the people who work this profession, because you're not seen. And today's show is telling you that you're seen. That's all.
That's right.
Just telling you you're seen. And if you don't think so, look around. Sometimes it's our fault. Sometimes we feel alone because we keep our head down. But if you can find the courage just to lift it up a little bit and look around you, you'll find that you're not alone.
Hey, if anybody's watching this show right now and you're not feeling too good about yourself, pick up the phone, dude. Pick up the phone. Call somebody. Call a hotline. Call a friend. Call your parents. Call a loved one. Call somebody. Don't sit there and just let it eat you alive. You know, you haven't done anything that's that serious that needs to take your life. You know, we can move on. There's another day. So pick up the phone. Don't do it. Pick up the phone. Talk to somebody.
Yeah. And hey, as we come to a close, this is a powerful episode. I'll definitely have it posted up shortly. I just want to get some closing thoughts, and maybe if you guys are willing to give out some contact information, promote the event that we have going on. I'm sure I'll be able to see people there as well. We'll go with Mr. Walker first. Hey, Steph, do you have anything you'd like to say in closing for the audience? And if you do want people to reach out, I don't know if there's something you need to promote, please, by all means, take this time and get out whatever you got to get out.
Yeah, just in closing, you touched on it, Tony. If we focus on people, on the humanity of people, the system will take care of itself. It will rectify. It will course correct. But we have to start looking out for each other and being intentionally aggressive about that care and concern. And if you don't feel seen, look, StephB63@me.com. Email me. I'll talk to you. I promise you're not alone.
You know, and I think what's great about that is at the end of this dialogue, I want people to realize something is that you have to believe that. This is more than just words. You know, this is where intent and behavior have to be in sync. So I'm telling you right now, if you know, or we're telling you right now that you're not alone, that's us telling you you're not alone. But you also have to believe it first before any help can come your way. Because again, as much as I like to say that, we could see all the signs. The best thing to do is if you could tell us. Let's not leave it as an assumption. That's the key, Steph, because again, guys, the thing about this is, because I had a nephew that killed himself back in 2006. I don't talk about it much. We do wind up kicking ourselves in the ass for the signs that we think we missed, that we don't realize that maybe it was our interactions with them that kept them alive that much longer. Maybe we don't realize that our interactions prolonged their life, and at one moment we weren't there is when they took it. But having said that, the best way to help someone help you is to not have them guess that you need help. It's first looking inwards, knowing you need it, and then going to someone you love who knows you outside the uniform, because that's the key, and saying, hey, I need your help because I don't know how to deal with today. And I honestly think that you can help me get through today so I'm better for tomorrow. Hey,
Tony,
Brian, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, we talk a lot in our profession about brotherhood and camaraderie and the stuff we go through. And, that feeling, and we've all had it when you've gone through hell and things have gone sideways and the sweat's pouring off you and things have finally calmed down and you're catching your breath and you have that feeling of camaraderie and love and companionship with your brother and sister officers. Don't let that be a fleeting moment. Let that guide you in all your interactions with your fellow officers. Let that love that you have, that camaraderie that you feel at that particular moment, let that ride with you every day. And not just behind the walls, not just when you're punching the clock. Let that ride with you at all times. Realize those men and women that are in there with you, that lifeline, they may not just need you when it's going sideways behind the walls. They may need you a lot more at other times. Be there for them. Really be that brother, that sister. Really be that person and step up. We all need to.
And you know what? Before I close, I want to say two thoughts. What Brian said, what Steph said, spot on, but I want people to know something. Being that brother and sister doesn't mean spending time with them. It means investing time in them. That matters. Because helping someone is not just simply being there, spending time. It's investing in them, because that to me is where worth comes in. And a lot of times, we'll say hi to someone in the hallway and how are you doing, but we don't care about what their response is because we keep moving. You're asking someone how you're doing, and maybe they are answering, but you don't know because you're already down the hallway, thinking how you're doing is the same as a hi, and it's not. Because there's one person that's waiting for someone to say how you're doing, and they're waiting to see if you're going to stay there and listen. And the moment you dismiss them, especially in a moment that they're vulnerable, they're never going to open up to anybody else again. So when you say how you're doing to somebody, you better make sure you have the time to hear their response. That's the key. How you're doing, you got to stop throwing it around thinking you could say how you're doing and not wait for the response or not care enough in the response. Having said that, how you're doing, I got a concern. What is it? Stop and just ask them what's happening. What's wrong? As always, guys, the show is Teared Up. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.